Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the August online meetup. I'm really excited about this one because it's our upcoming release. It's a bit of a peek into one of the main new features in Rancher 2.5, which is due out in October. It's the enhanced EKS support, so lifecycle management preview that we're doing in Rancher 2.5 coming out just after the summer. So my name is Tom Callway. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Rancher, and I'm joined today by my friend and my colleague Bill Maxwell, who runs our product management team. And Bill's going to be holding court for most of this meetup. And then Ricky is one of our senior software engineers who is involved in the coding for the new release. He's going to be manning the questions and answers, so you can he'll be fielding those out to Bill mainly after we've done the demo. First things first, if you haven't been to one of these online meetups before, they're really not webinars. I mean, to be honest with you, we don't find webinars particularly impactful. They tend to be like 45 minutes of pitching product. And that's not really what we're about, to be honest with you. We're about delivering insight, educating people, and crucially, getting feedback. That's really what meetups are all about. That's what people enjoy going to see and sort of getting involved in. They don't want to sit there passively and be sold to for an hour or whatever. So that's not what this is. And as with any meetup, there are rules. Timing isn't a priority, so I'm not going to be closing down proceedings as soon as we hit the top of the hour. You will go on as long as there are questions that we need to answer, and really it's all about the questions at the end of the day. I mean, not a lot of software companies do previews like this of new features. We don't do it just because we're trying to fill time. We're doing it because we really want to get your view on where you think we're heading with the features, how much value they're going to add to you. So and we can only gauge that through the questions. So please use the question capability in GoToWebinar. It should be fairly easy to find in the toolbar, and ask those questions during the presentations or afterwards during the actual Q&A session. There really are no bad questions. Don't feel if you're relatively new to this, don't feel that you're going to be embarrassed by asking a newbie question. That's cool. We all start there, so it's fine. And really, whilst I'm going to be speaking a little bit, trying to provide some context for Rancher and for the upcoming release, and Bill will be talking, I suppose, at a high level about what we're planning. We're really going to try and get to the demo as quickly as possible. Now, bear in mind that we're not at GA code level yet, so that there will be things in the demo, I suspect, that won't work quite as intended. And if they do break, please be patient. And that also goes for GoToWebinar. I think largely these online platforms have become a bit more reliable now. We're 4 or 5 months into COVID, but sometimes they do break. And if that's the case, please be patient. If we go offline, if we have a power cut or something like that, please be patient. We'll try and be back as quickly as possible. We do this for a bit of fun. If you're on Twitter, there is a hashtag for these meetups, Rancher Meetup. If you do that and do a picture of yourself, we always like to see those, and we'll give you some Twitter love and a retweet, and it's just all good. It's good karma. Another community thing that we highly encourage anybody who's using Rancher to become a member of is our Slack channel, our community Slack channel. It says there 15,913. It's around 20,000 now, so I don't know how old the slide is. It really is very interactive, very well attended. There's always interesting, insightful people on there. If you're not a Rancher customer, but you're using Rancher anyway, and you want to give feedback, or you've got a technical problem or whatever, head over to slack.rancher.io, sign up there, and engage with the community. It is not an excuse for us to spam you with marketing material. That's, again, not what we do. Right, so that's the housekeeping done. and I will try and get through my little intro as quickly as possible. After I've kind of set the context, told you about our recipe for production grade Kubernetes, which is Rancher essentially, but also how we build that stack. I'll do that. If you've seen it before, apologies. I'll get through as quickly as possible. Then I'll hand over to Bill, who's going to give you some insight into the key features in 2.5, and then do a much deeper dive into the enhanced EKS Lifecycle Management capabilities that we're planning to release. So once he's done that, which is kind of like a slideware portion, we'll get onto the demo, and then there'll be a Q&A, and after that's finished, we'll wrap up. Introduction. I expect if you've attended one of these meetups before, you probably will have seen this diagram or a version of it. Internally, we call it the Cubecake. It's really our recipe for production grade Kubernetes in the enterprise, and it's made up of 3 components. The first one is the making sure that you're running a certified Kubernetes distribution, and that should enable you to run certified Kubernetes in any location, whether it's on your laptop or whether it's in your data center, in the cloud, not just compute but also hosted Kubernetes, and increasingly now this really interesting nascent market of edge Kubernetes, whether it's the thick edge, that's kind of the branch, the sort of Starbucks kind of use case, where you're putting clusters into every coffee shop, or also very common now is 5G towers and oil rigs and I don't know, cruise liners and trains and all these these use cases which are at the very extreme, the thin edge. So you should really be able to pick the Kubernetes distribution, the certified Kubernetes distribution that best fits your use case. We're not into forcing a vendor monoculture on people. There are lots of fantastic distributions out there. Rancher does produce some really great distributions, RKE and K3S principally, but we also support any other certified Kubernetes distribution. And the central management component sits on top of that, on top of the Kubernetes distribution. And we feel that the 3 things that you really need is, so you need to make your life simpler from an operations perspective, and also more consistent, making sure that all those clusters that you're running in a multi-cluster, potentially multi-cloud environment are all operated in the same way. Having consistent security policy and user management authentication applied to them. Really having a really strong RBAC model is something that's crucial to running Kubernetes at scale. And then shared tools and services is all about adoption. It's all about giving IT ops and developers, DevOps people, the tools, easy access to the tools that they're already using. So definitely not forcing proprietary observability tools on them. Obviously giving them the opportunity to use those tools if they like them, but as our primary focus is making sure that we give our users access to tools they're most likely already using, and it's just a click away. Things like Prometheus and Grafana and FluentD and Helm and these very, very common open source projects. So we think this is the essential recipe, and this is how Rancher delivers those. Apologies, we've got a little bit of a factor, but if you can just imagine, you can see through some of the confusion there. But for that first layer, you've got the simplified operations and infrastructure management. That piece is satisfied by Rancher as a Kubernetes management platform by handling your version management of Kubernetes, giving you a fantastic observability experience, doing that the centralized audit piece, really easy, super simple cluster provisioning, having containerized persistent block storage just one click away. I mean, we generally advise people to use Longhorn, but we support all sorts of other third-party storage solutions as well. That's a critical piece. The next layer up, Active Directory is by far the most popular, and we've got fantastic Active Directory support from within Rancher, and make that very, very easy to set up. But of course, if you're using Okta, it's very popular, GitHub, OpenLDAP, whatever your authentication platform is, we make it super easy for you to integrate your Kubernetes clusters with those authentication systems, and then apply a really solid, strong RBAC model against those, and enforce security best practices, particularly for us, the sort of CIS benchmarking. Being able to template out those best practice configurations and then roll them out across your organization in a consistent way. We also have a CIS scanner now that automatically scans the clusters before they're deployed. Pretty cool stuff. And then sitting on top of that is the shared tools and services. We have built-in support and provide an SLA for our customers on Prometheus, Grafana, and Longhorn. Istio, service mesh is super easy to deploy within Rancher. These are built into Rancher and are very easy to deploy. But we also have a very rich catalog of open source projects and third-party applications, which make it super easy to install whatever you prefer, whatever you need, whatever your use case demands. And then sitting on top of that, you have your containerized applications. So that's our recipe for production quality Kubernetes everywhere. And who benefits? Well, principally it's IT operators and it's DevOps, and they tend to exploit the resources that Rancher makes available to them on top of their certified Kubernetes distribution. So for IT ops, it's cluster as a service and namespace as a service principally, providing that really simple, secure, logical environment to be able to manage multiple Kubernetes clusters in multiple environments and multiple clouds, compute and hosted Kubernetes, making sure that you've got centralized visibility, you've got consistent security policies applied to all the clusters that you manage and so forth. And then for the DevOps, the developer kind of personas, it's all about making sort of continuous delivery easier, giving them the ability to do blue-green deployments, canary deployments, easy auto scaling, doing all the plumbing around DNS and load balancing and so forth. Just making their life so much easier, and them not having to worry about necessarily the way in which all this sort of stuff is put together. And they're leveraging the tools that we pre-package into Rancher and deliver up for free. There's only one version of Rancher. You can go up and download it from GitLab. We don't have an open core model. All of this good stuff that I've been talking about is available to you for free. If you need help in deploying it at scale, that's why we exist. With that, I hope I haven't taken up too much time. I will hand over the reins to Bill, who's going to be talking about the upcoming update. So Bill, let me just see if I can find you in this long list of people, and I will hand you the ball.
Great, thanks, Tom. Okay, so Rancher 2.5 update. Currently, we're targeting Rancher 2.5 early October for release. The key high-level features is that we'll be introducing our fleet management, which is our answer for application deployment and GitOps at scale. So users will be able to define cluster groups, tie those to a Git repository, and be able to roll out application deployment and cluster configuration across clusters, lots of clusters safely. We're really excited about that, and that'll be GA with the 2.5. We're enhancing our cluster observability pieces. So we've taken a look at our existing monitoring and logging and come up with new V2 versions. They'll all be delivered via new Helm charts. Certified packages is what we're calling them. They'll install onto the cluster, and we're enhancing the way that monitoring works at a cluster level to start out with, and we'll continue to build on that. But it gives you much more flexibility in configuration options, the ability to define your own service monitors, edit configuration, and being able to add your own custom dashboards. The other key feature highlight that we have a new FIPS enabled Kubernetes distro. There's a new release of our Kubernetes, which will be compiled against boring crypto libraries, and we're working through certifying that through FIPS. We'll have more on that as we get closer to launch, but we're pretty excited about that. And so today's topic, the other key feature and why we're all here today, is to talk about what we're doing around EKS Lifecycle Management. what we've seen is that a lot of users are moving from on-prem to the cloud, and they're giving strong consideration to EKS or AKS or other hosted providers. And we think that makes a lot of sense, as it relieves a lot of the operational burden for the end users. They're native and they have a lot of deep integrations with the cloud platforms. And they are, Rancher looks at them as what they are, certified CNCF Kubernetes distributions. So we want to be able to manage those. We've also found that a lot of users that have started out in the cloud have created a bunch of EKS clusters, and they've got a lot of users, different teams have gone different directions, and so they need to be able to pull those all together and centralize the management and configuration of these clusters. And so that varies at different levels. There's the Kubernetes applications and being able to roll out, getting a centralized view of all of these clusters, their overall health, how they're monitored, how they're logged, and just really get a single pane of glass. And so we've supported EKS since 2.0 shipped, and so we've come back now to revisit how we're implementing that and expanding our offering and doing a deeper integration to address these other additional use cases. And so what's new coming into the lifecycle, we see that as key is the configuring it and the provisioning bits, the management of the operational components, the security, and then just being able to perform cluster upgrades. And so what we've added, or what we're moving to in 2.5, is our EKS clusters will be exclusively provisioned with managed node groups. We've added more bells and whistles, so you'll be able to configure the endpoint public-private availability, the control plane logging options, and then this next one is one of the key differences, and we're really excited because it addresses the use cases where people have been provisioning with other tools, and being able to take over some of the management responsibilities of imported clusters. In 2.4, when you imported a cluster, we could manage RBAC and authorization. We give you the central pane of glass, but we've been often asked, can I upgrade or manage the Kubernetes clusters once I've imported them? And so we're adding that capability in 2.5. Once you'll be able to continue and add and remove multiple managed node groups, update the settings after they've been installed. Our new monitoring and logging solutions will deploy onto the clusters and manage all of them. We've got our Istio versions, and then we'll be able to manage and deploy applications and configuration through Fleet at the Kubernetes layer. And that is managing all of you can use a GitOps-based workflow to deploy those. The other key thing that we're expanding our core tools over into EKS, which is new. So typically CIS scanning, the EKS and the CIS working group have come up with a benchmark for the EKS specifically. So we'll have a new profile that'll allow you to scan EKS clusters for CIS compliance. You'll be able to set up scanning the scheduled and or ad hoc scans, get a report, and then if anything starts failing, you can get an alert if that happens. We have the OPA gatekeeper that'll be coming out, or that we'll be able to deploy on EKS, and you can manage your OPA configurations. We've also switched from coupling the credential to the cluster definition to using a cloud credential, which allows you to rotate the keys without having to update anything about the cluster itself, or go to multiple clusters to update the key, and it just centralizes the key management within Rancher. We've been using it in the node groups for a while, and so now we're bringing it to EKS provisioning. And then the upgrade and management now is coming to the imported clusters. And so out of the box, what we'll be providing for you is a simple EKS cluster without any configuration updates. You'll be able to deploy a VPC with the subnets that you'll need to deploy an ASG, a single managed node group to start. You can add additional These will all be configured, but it supports also deploying into an existing VPC. So if you've got advanced setups, you can configure those and then deploy into that. We've also added support for tagging, KMS encryption of the etcd or of the data at rest, all the logging configurations, the security groups, manage node groups. We've added a lot of the functionality, so it has much better feature parity and bells and whistles with what you're able to do through the EKS console today. And so now with the enhanced import, there's a new option, and we'll walk through this in the demo, of registering a Kubernetes cluster. And so with that, when you register, it has some additional capabilities over our traditional importing path. And that will bring the ability to upgrade the Kubernetes version and manage the node groups. It'll also bring in setting new tags, adding labels, and tweaking settings like the endpoint configuration and the control plane logging configuration. So with its new registration command, you'll be able to have a lot better flexibility of managing the cluster. It'll also be synchronizing states. So if changes are made on the EKS AWS side, those will be reflected back into the Rancher control plane, and you'll be able to see the configuration information and the changes that have been made in the Rancher UI as well. And so when it all comes together, what we see happening is that you'll have your EKS clusters, and they can be Rancher provisioned. You can provision with EKS Cuddle, Terraform, however you're getting them. You'll be able to import and manage them through Rancher, and you'll be able to manage, get the logging, monitoring, CIS scanning, OPA gatekeeper, Istio. Those will all be able to deploy onto these clusters, and you'll have this unified experience and seamless delivery. You can leverage our fleet GitOps workflows to roll out changes, to roll out all this configuration information and your own applications to these EKS clusters. So we think you'll have a lot of good chance. The experience becomes really simplified in delivering applications to your clusters moving forward. All right, now before we get to the demo, might be a good time to take a look at some questions. Is Grafana and the Prometheus implementation going to be configurable in 2.5? So what we've done in 2.5 for monitoring, I mean, each of those high-level features could take up a meetup on their own. But the new monitoring, we've always used the Prometheus operator, but we're tweaking the way that we've interacted with that and allowing the user more flexibility in what they can control and configure beyond what we have out of the box. So you will be able to have your own dashboards come on and still be able to use that. So yeah, the new monitoring will be a lot more flexible and provide a lot of use cases there. We have another question about CIS scanning on other cluster types. The primary focus is to expand the CIS scans. Those will be coming to other cluster types. Today in 2.4, we currently support scanning RKE clusters, but we are moving to support EKS, AKS, RKE, our next distribution, K3S should be included, but we're also working on a hook that'll come out at some point to allow the user to just provide a custom Kubebench profile as well. And so that should mitigate and be able to give the user can create a custom profile and then be able to leverage the built-in monitor, like continuous scanning schedule and reporting mechanisms, so that you'll be able to capture these reports. So we have another question on provisioning EKS clusters with auto scaling and spot instances support, and import the clusters into Rancher. So the new mechanisms that we're taking to provision are leveraging the new managed node group functionality. We think that's the direction most people will ultimately want to go. They do currently have a few limitations around spot instances and some other capabilities, but still the benefits of being able to manage those node groups, we think outweigh some of the trade-offs. If you would like to continue using custom AMIs and your own auto-scaling groups, you can always use the previous method of importing the cluster and provision. And so we won't be taking over the provisioning bits, but you can still leverage all of the other capabilities of Rancher on top of that. So we're not preventing you from using EKS in any way. Okay, so we do have a high-level question on 2.5 going GA. That'll be, as mentioned earlier, we're targeting early October. Rancher typically releases two minor releases a year, one at the end of Q1, early Q2 timeframe, and one at the end of Q3, early Q4 timeframe. So that'll Rancher 2.5 will line up with that. Cool. So again, that's the questions right now. High-level 2.5 questions right now. I mean, right now this is what we're ready to talk about. Yeah, we're gonna dive into EKS at this time. So here is a fresh Rancher installation running a very alpha version of Rancher 2.5. Please keep in mind, today what we're going to be able to demo and focus on is the provisioning and importing capabilities of Rancher in EKS. This is early software, so if things break, please bear with us. But we also would love to. Since it's so early, in the development bits, we have time and would love feedback from users that are interested in this capability. If you can reach out to us on the public Slack, either in the Meetup channel or in general, we'll keep an eye out for this. But we're very, very interested in hearing the different use cases and challenges people are having in EKS that they're hoping Rancher can address. And so you can really help us shape the product and where it's going. And we really value that input. So if you're willing to share, please reach out. Let's add a new cluster. So here's the add cluster page. We'll start with provisioning a new cluster. Select EKS. This will be Meetup Live. We're going to use US East 2. I will use my cloud credential. If I don't already have a cloud credential, I can create a new one, but essentially this is a reference to a location where we're storing the API keys for managing AWS cloud credentials. So then I would go in and configure the cluster. I'm now presented with some basic options. I can select my Kubernetes version. I can support pick my service roles, or I can pick from existing roles that were created previously. I will create a new one. If I want to encrypt secrets at rest, I can select my KMS keys. I can add additional tags to the cluster options. I'm going to stick with the defaults. I can configure the access endpoint. So Amazon has released the ability to do a private endpoint, which keeps the Kubernetes API on a private network instead of exposing it publicly to the internet. They also add capability to, if you do expose it publicly, they do provide some whitelisting around or allow lists around the access points. So you can lock that down to specific IP ranges or IPs. I'm going to go with the standard VPC setup from our slides. This will create 3 public subnets and the VPC, and the security groups inside that VPC, and just enable all the communication that we'll need. The reason we're just going with that is it provides some flexibility here. And then I will go to the security group configuration. Because I'm using the VPC that we're creating, it also is going to use the security group that it creates as well. I have advanced logging options that I can turn on that'll go into CloudWatch. I'm going to leave those off for now, but those are available. I'm going to create a managed node group. Select instance sizes, have full configuration of the ASG that will be underlying it. I can select my API keys. I can also enable GPU, add additional tags and labels. Now, the cool thing that is new to 2.5 that we weren't able to do in 2.4 is that we can now add additional node groups. So I can create multiple, I can have a base one and then have a GPU set of node groups as well, depending on how that works with a different set of scaling and a different ASG. And so I'm not going to do that right now, but that option is now available to you, and that is new functionality. So that looks good, and I will create the cluster. So now this is calling out to the Amazon APIs. It'll be provisioning the control plane, and then it'll add the node groups, and then we should see that appear. It takes a bit of time. And before I move on, I'm gonna take a quick look at the questions. So we do have a question around EKS upgrades being supported in 2.5. Yes, they are. We'll demo that in a few minutes. Will this support the AWS VPC CNI plugins for Kubernetes? Ricky, do you know the answer to that one?
No, I do not, but we can take a look.
Okay. Yeah, we can get back to you in the Slack channel if you're available, or if you want to, if that's something we find before the end of the meetup, we can let you know. Okay, great. Cloud credentials, are those an endpoint in AWS? No, those are a Rancher cloud credential. It's the way that we manage and store those. Just for a real quick sideline demo, I can show you. We have this cloud credential section here. When you add a new one, you pick your cloud provider. So we manage them now for Azure, Amazon, DigitalOcean. So you would pick that, add your access and secret key. And now what's nice here is these are now centralized. So anything that references these will pick up the key automatically when it goes to perform an operation, whether it's to restore a node or update the Kubernetes cluster. And it decouples needing to configure or go to every cluster where this key was used previously and update each one individually. So this just centralizes and simplifies the operational management of that. But cloud credentials are a Rancher concept. The API calls for AWS, these are a combination, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, of direct API calls to Amazon and also through CloudFormation templates.
That's correct.
Great. I'm not sure I fully understand this one, but support for KMS envelope encryption for secrets. That was already answered, sorry. So we have a question on how does it compare EKS through Rancher versus the EKS console. We simplify it, and so one way to do it is, it's multiple steps, I believe, in multiple locations to get everything up and running within Amazon, the AWS console. We also make it such that if you were provisioning through Rancher, it gives you a simplified interface, and it's very specific to provisioning an EKS cluster. The user doesn't necessarily need to know how to go into Amazon, but the enhancements that we're adding don't prevent anyone from using other methods as well. And so we have a question of some of the implementation under the hood. Ultimately, if this is being done with a CRD, ultimately, where we want to, you want to answer that? Okay.
Yeah, I typed out an answer, but yeah, it's using a tool that we created called EKS Operator, which operates on a new CRD, which is the EKS Cluster Config CRD. And this tool can actually be used outside of Rancher, but that's what we're leveraging. And that that drives like the provisioning and maintaining of the cluster state.
How does it handle IAM service roles for pods? EKS manages those through an AWS auth config in the kube system, config map in the kube system namespace for mapping those. That is still something the end user manages directly themselves if they want to leverage that capability. We are considering in the future, adding some support around that through the Rancher control plane. But at this time, it's not currently available. Okay. And then in general, the Terraform provider for Rancher, the Rancher 2 Terraform provider specifically, will be updated to support provisioning EKS clusters through Rancher in 2.5 as well. Yeah. Okay. So cool. I'm going to move on in the demo. A lot of great questions. Keep them coming, and we'll come back to it towards the end. So I've already provisioned an existing cluster. So now I just want to show that I can now edit it. Continue to update the credentials. I am going to, say I decided that I did want to add another node group. I can add build I just need to add one more node, and this time this is say I need a little more power. So I'll go with M5 large, and I'll tweak my HD. I just need one, and so now I can just save that and add it. And so now the cluster goes out, updates, and manages that, and we should see new nodes appear in here in a little bit. But now, while that's updating, and we should see new nodes, and this one's provisioning, let's take a look at importing a cluster. So in the 2.5 UI, there's this new option to register a cluster. In 2.4, we introduced the concept of being able to do K3S upgrades through the Rancher admin once they were imported. So now we've got a similar path. So you can come for this workflow for K3s or the new Amazon EKS workflow. I'm going to call this build this control live. And then I've added this, select which region, which cloud credentials I'm going to use. And then I've got a nice drop down of the clusters that are available for importing. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to select this credential and register the cluster. And so while that's provisioning and going through the import process, I will come to this one. So I've previously imported this cluster. This cluster was created with EKS control, and you can see that it's got a managed node group here. But now, if I want to edit the configuration of this, I can now do so. I come here and click this. If I wanted to change any of these settings, I can add additional tags, change the log settings. I can see that this is all learned from the import process on the existing node group and see all the labels that were created as part of it. But now I can also add a new node group. And this assumes that you're going to have Rancher take over the management of this going forward. Just saving on costs. I can save that. So now this cluster is now updating and we're getting the import capability. Let's go to cluster. So we should see new nodes start popping up. Yeah, while these things are going on, let's take some more questions. So on the CIS scanning, so we are moving the CIS scans to support EKS clusters. Today they only support RKE clusters, but the capability and the feature is now coming to, we're ultimately planning to bring it to all of the cluster types, starting with from RKE2, and EKS will be supported in our next distribution. So we are working towards allowing the user to scan all cluster types that we support. So we have a question on the AWS IAM users and how Rancher users work. I'll take a pass at this, and then Ricky, you can fill in some of the blanks. Rancher manages users, centralizes auth, and because Rancher can be tied to like an AD or some other system, it does not have a direct integration with IAM. And so Rancher users will be independent of your users in Amazon. You can still have the Rancher administrative users created and then not share that necessarily with end users, and still manage the IAM AWS profile, the AWS auth config directly if you want to continue using the AWS IAM integrations. That would also probably be the path that you would bind certain service account types for application level type of permissions for roles. At this time, the integration between the AWS auth and the Rancher users is they are not related at this time. What's the difference between registering a cluster and importing an existing cluster? So registering a cluster is an imported type that Rancher is going to recognize and be able to take on additional levels of management. Typically, when we said imported, you would deploy our agents into an existing Kubernetes cluster, and that use case continues going forward. But when you import it, we deploy our cluster agent and our node agents, and we're able to bring you the dashboard, centralize the authentication. All of our tooling can come to those clusters. But when it comes to the management of the underlying Kubernetes cluster, we do not add any capabilities at that. We're just managing it at the Kubernetes layer. With this new registration process, what we're working on and towards is that we will recognize it, and based on the type and what credential, in the case of a K3S cluster, we just understand that and have a way to upgrade and manage those. When it comes to EKS, we now require, as part of the registration process, require credentials to talk to the AWS APIs. And there's two modes that'll be supported. One where Rancher can directly talk to the Kubernetes endpoint, depending on how you have your networking configured, and it will automatically deploy those agents, or it will you'll have to deploy the agents yourself through the Kubernetes manifest, but Rancher will still be able to communicate with the Kubernetes API through the AWS APIs, and then once our agents are deployed, be able to access Kubernetes that way through outbound connections from the cluster to the Rancher control plane. And at that point, we can interact. We have a lot more flexibility in how we can interact with the cluster and what level of supportability and configuration we can add on top of that. So that's 2.5. It's bringing in this new concept for registering. And keep in mind, this is alpha. We might change the names of things, or we might, it might shift a bit in the UX. So this is, again, just early, but we wanted to get the feedback around what the new provisioning in EKS bits. So with any support for the storage provider, CSI providers, right now we're supporting whatever is deployed on the EKS cluster, which I believe they're deploying their cloud provider. And so, service type load balancer works, and the I haven't personally tested. Ricky, maybe are we doing anything to make sure that the storage provider CSI plugins are installed, or is that native in EKS?
I'm not sure. We're not doing anything to check it though.
Okay. Will 2.5 be moving to using K3s or K3s versus K8s? For an HA environment. Sorry, there's a follow-up there. Rancher, supports both models. And so if you're running, the supported RKE cluster underneath, then that is going to continue to work and is 100% supported. K3s was added as an option for installing onto an HA cluster as well. We're not forcing users down one path or another at this time. And there's no migration between the two, and that will not be included as well. That is not slated for 2.5 as a functionality to migrate between the two. But you can still, when you're starting out on a fresh install, you have your you have the ability to pick out what that looks like. All right, so let's see what's gone. So while we've been answering questions, you can see now we've added new node groups. So this new node has appeared here. So this was an imported cluster that Rancher knew nothing about, did not configure, has learned through the API what was brought into the cluster, and then we were able to update and manage that going forward. I'm guessing I've got a permissions problem with this cluster. That's why this one's not importing. And then here's the cluster we provisioned live. It was added, and so you can see we've got this new version. I kind of wish I had picked an older version of Kubernetes to deploy, so we could have done an upgrade. I was banking on this one coming in.
Yeah. You can import my cluster if you'd like, Bill. It is an older one, I believe.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
It's armware-import and US East 2. US East 2.
Thank you.
That top one.
This one?
Yep. Should be good.
So, yeah, we did have a question come in on will we be able to show a change made in Amazon reflected back in? Not in this build. That functionality is being added, so that change is made in the EKS console or AWS console or through your other management tool that you've been managing with. Those changes would be synced back, but right now in this build, it's currently only on the initial import. I think this is running into the same problem. So it looks like, let's see if I can fix this real quick. I think we need to edit that AWS auth config to include this user. It sounds like we've got a bunch of folks looking to deploy Rancher 2.5. There's currently not an alpha build. This is just on the bleeding edge and picked at a time when things were stable-ish. When it comes to the managed node groups, Ricky, are we allowing custom AMIs or are they specific AMIs?
Yeah, so managed node only, like when you're creating them in AWS, which is what we do, they only provide you with two options, which is GPU or non-GPU, and then they choose the image. More investigation as to images are exactly, but those are the only options.
All right, just a question around KMS being supported. So when we're saying KMS is being supported, what we're saying is if you have an existing KMS key in Amazon, we do not create a new one or anything like that for you. So you have to have that already existing. But if AWS EKS provides a integration where they will use a KMS key to encrypt the secrets stored in the database, just using Kubernetes encryption, secrets encryption on the resources, I'm sure. And then in order for that to work, they just they require as an input a ARN, I believe, of the KMS key that you want to use, and that gets passed down to the cluster or to the configuration, and that key is then used for managing encryption at rest of whatever resources they have configured. So hopefully that clarifies, but Rancher itself never actually has like a private key or any of that encryption data directly added to itself. It just happens to know the ARN for configuration purposes. So another question about running Rancher on EKS. Today that is not officially supported, and the main reason behind that is the ability to do backups of your data. So today, to back up and restore before an upgrade, we recommend that you take an etcd snapshot so that if something were to go terribly wrong, you could revert back to that status. In the case of running Rancher on a hosted provider, part of the value of the hosted provider is that all etcd operations are managed for you, and so you don't have direct access to those databases. And so we've looked at other tools in the ecosystem around supporting those backup, like doing Kubernetes level backups. We haven't established a level of confidence with those this time. This is something we are looking to address in the future and support a application level backup of the Rancher stack that would make it much safer and to run the Rancher application on these platforms. Yeah. At this time, there's a question about Windows worker support. At this time, we have not added support for that yet. That's on the roadmap to add at a later time.
Well, I don't believe managed node group support Windows workers at all.
Okay. Do you know if a user builds the cluster themselves with Windows nodes that we could import that? Maybe
yes, you can import it, not register, but I mean, okay, I don't know for certain, but I would believe that yes, you can import it.
That'd be something we'd have to test directly. All right, how's it going over there?
I added it. You can try making a change to like the description or something so that the controller doesn't wait on the back off. See what happens. So someone shared documentation that I was looking at before. I was looking at an issue and they said that it was on their roadmap, but that may be outdated. I'm looking at documentation someone sent me right now. And it looks like spot instance support may be as simple as using labels, which should support unknown groups. So if that is, then I would imagine that's something that we experiment with and we're going to address before we can give like an actual word on it. But if it is just a label, then it should be feasible.
Okay, cool. So this cluster has finished importing. We have, you can see that it's a 116 cluster. It's got one node, so I'm assuming one node group. So now when we edit this, we can do a cluster upgrade. We'll use this key because this one has access. So now we can select a newer version. And we will click save. Now, in order to upgrade the nodes while this is going on, I'll just talk to the process. And so what you could do is when you upgrade, you could also add a new node group at the same time. And that would create a new node group with the new version that'll match the control plane. And then your old node group, your existing node group would stay at the current version. And so you could then drain and coordinate and move your workloads to the new node group once it's up and running. Or you can do what we're doing here, which is updating the control plane. And then we don't currently have UI for it, so I'm going to go to the API. And then update the node group manually, and that'll upgrade the nodes. We do have another question about will this new implementation open up possibilities for EKS templates similar to RKE templates? Yes, that is a direction we're looking towards going. It won't be in 2.5, but we are looking at ultimately what we want to be able to do is get to a point where you can define a configuration, a base configuration for a cluster, regardless of where it is, sort of, and then be able to apply that through Rancher to provision on the different cluster types. So, and given that that might be accomplished in a couple different ways, we're still investigating. We're looking at maybe this is better served through kind of a GitOps model where you would administratively create a cluster group, and then every cluster that comes into that group gets a base level of configuration. Or also part of our longer term strategy is to move additional, as we move towards GitOps, is to make Rancher itself much more configurable via the Kubernetes, like Kubernetes API. And so then that would open up Rancher to being configurable through a GitOps workflow as well. So that's a direction you'll see us going over the next several releases, just to support that use case. We still continue to support and heavily advocate the Terraform workflow for infrastructure as code today. That allows you to configure your source in infrastructure, version control your configuration through Terraform, and then apply that configuration downstream. It's just another option that we want to open is to introduce the these GitOps-based workflows. All right, it looks like that should be coming online.
What edit did you do? Are you editing? Did you add a node group or?
I didn't add the node group. I just changed the version, and so according to the logs right now, it's just the EKS cluster is updating on Amazon side. So far, these haven't been the most expedient updates on the AWS side.
Yeah, they take a while. And the duration seems to vary, but I can't.
Yeah. Wonder if it's, yeah, I don't know what drives that. Do you know the delay or the anticipated delay with the new model between supporting new versions of Kubernetes on EKS in Rancher? So when they release 1.18, for instance, how long it will take? Will it be automatically picked up?
So before, yes, funnily enough, I just added validation that would hinder that so that we would have to do a minor release, but it's not impossible
A minor or
for
patch?
us to patch, my bad. It's not impossible for us to make it so that it's automatic. It would just be removing that, and that's just something that we can discuss. Yeah. Like if it's something that's desired, then yes, we can make it automatic, but getting a patch release out for that shouldn't be a big issue either. They don't come out very often.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to like minor version or patch versions of Kubernetes and like different stuff like that, you can get a new one of those just by rotating your node groups. And that's automatic because it's managed node groups. So it'll be like when you create a new node group or upgrade a new node group, you'll be getting like the freshest AMI, unlike last time where we had to, in 2.4, we always had to make a release in order for you to have new regions and stuff like that. And regions we may be able to do without new releases. I have to look.
We had another question. Do you know how add-on updates or upgrades will be between EKS versions? Are they automatically done or are they controlled independently? Like
what upgrades?
Like Core DNS, the CNI for AWS and Kubeproxy.
No, I don't know about that. I'll have to look at that.
Okay. We'll get back to you.
I mean, I would think that EKS would do some of those because they manage them, don't they? So they manage like their core DNS and everything. Like they deploy it in the first place.
I'd have to read that myself. I'm not sure. Yeah. We'll have to take a look at that functionality as well for upgrading.
Yeah, if it's something people really want, I mean, you can certainly add it and consider it.
So I think the idea would be then you update the control plane. We will eventually add a UI for this, but at this point you have to come to the API, and if you look at the cluster object, you would edit this and change this version on the node group if you wanted to edit it in place. And then you would change it to the 1.17 version and it would automatically update those node groups. Again, if you want to do it in the UI, you could add a new node group. We can come here, add a new node group that will automatically pick up the new Kubernetes version. We will deploy it with the version set on the control plane, and then cordon this node group, and then delete it once we're comfortable that our workloads have moved off of it, and then come back here and delete this node group. So you can now orchestrate the underlying Kubernetes version this way. Sounds like, at least for a documentation standpoint, there would be, sounds like in the system namespace. There we go. We finally got a new version. It went to 17. So now I'll go view it into API and we'll edit it. It's in this EKS. Let's go do it the other way. So add the new node group.
And we're being asked about like other managed Kubernetes distros, and I think like that's something that we'd be curious to hear like what people's inputs are and like what they would like to see in AKS or other providers.
Yeah, so we started with EKS. And yeah, I mean, certainly always listening, but AKS and GKE are on the list for the same level of treatment with the new registration capability and being able to manage and making sure that it's sort of two parts, right? There's the provisioning and the infrastructure management capabilities of the underlying cloud provider, which is what we've been looking at today. And then there's the expansion of the day two operations tools onto these different clusters. And so we'll be working on both fronts, really wrapping it, making it possible. So CIS scanning will be coming, we're working towards supporting, we're moving from just RKE to EKS, AKS. The next distribution of our fifth enabled distribution should be supported as well. But the monitoring and the logging and being able to get all that data and being able to deploy your day two operations and simplifying that story are all things that we plan on doing. And then also this this next level of provisioning and registration importing is also on our roadmap to add that functionality moving forward. So now if we add the next node group, that new node group, if I go and look at it in the API, I'm assuming it just hasn't been set yet. Does that just get set when it's actually created there?
No, the way it works right now is a little funky. This is being reworked and there will be a PR and that'll automatically be set. So like, did you create that node group or is this like a—
Yeah, I just created it. Node? Yeah, so I just created this one.
The version being null right now, it won't automatically, will be upgraded and it'll just follow whatever the control plane version is.
Okay.
But we're changing that. So yeah, we're gonna change it so that there's no like automatic, and then it's similar to the EKS console where you just choose which one's upgrade or delete and create a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. We got new nodes.
Are you currently updating a node group?
I just added a new one and so here we can see that they're being created with 117. And so this is just sort of walking through what a cluster upgrade would look like. And so then now, once that's done, I could go and, I can coordinate all, drain it. All right, but that would be how you'd upgrade. These little bugs will get worked out before we ship a GA version. So thank you all for attending and the demos and taking a look at EKS. And like I said, there's public Slack forums. If you please reach out in either the Meetup channel and just ask questions, or if there's things that we didn't get to, we'll be keeping an eye on that today. And in general, people are always in the Slack channels. Rancher employees are in the Slack channels, just kind of monitoring and answering questions as they can. To get started, you can check out if you want to just see this, if you're new to Rancher, there's the Rancher Quick Start Guides in the Rancher docs. You can follow these to quickly get up and running with Rancher and test the existing functionality. This stuff is a bit early. I wouldn't recommend running it just yet. But if you are feeling adventurous and do give it a shot and have feedback for us, GitHub issues, or again in the Slack channels, your feedback is welcome and encouraged and appreciated. Yeah. Other things that we work on, Rancher is certainly our biggest main product, but everyone knows that our RKE is our CNCF certified Kubernetes distribution that runs under the hood for our provision clusters today. We've got K3S as our edge solution. It's lightweight and able to deploy and operationally simplified to run in your branch or edge use cases. Longhorn, our storage project, has been as part of the CNCF sandbox now, has gone GA. That's a block storage that you can use in your Kubernetes cluster to create a replicated volume for use within your cluster. And we're adding support. Keep an eye on that one. The roadmap for that is pretty exciting. We also have a hosted Rancher service. So if you do not want to run your Rancher control plane, but you want all the benefits of Rancher, we can run that for you. It's an add-on to our Platinum support subscription, and so we can run that. And you just run your downstream clusters, and Rancher engineering handles all of the upgrades, backups of the control plane. We have some open source projects. Rio is a PaaS-like solution that you can deploy onto a Kubernetes cluster and get simplified Git workflows that are integrated with service mesh rollouts. And that's one of our projects on GitHub. K3OS is a lightweight operating system that deploys K3s super simply. Fleet will be moving into GA status with 2.5, but this is our GitOps solution and really focused on safely delivering applications to lots of clusters through Git-based workflows and rolling those out. We have our Submariner project, which is under development and used to connect overlay networks between different Kubernetes clusters. You can check those out. If you're looking to learn more, we've got our master classes, we've got our academy, we've got our docs, and we're constantly finding ways to help bring both Kubernetes and Rancher knowledge to the community. So we encourage you to take a look at those. So yeah, Rancher Academy is our walkthrough. You walk through it and get certified Rancher operator. It has a lot of knowledge to impart and a good foundation for using Rancher and Kubernetes concepts. So I want to say thank you, everyone, for bearing with us in a demo with some of our early alpha software and taking a look and providing feedback and all these great questions. Yeah, really appreciate all your time today. Thank you. Take care.